welcome to my presentation. My name is Paralise Martinez, and I'm the author of the chapbook Cookie Song, forthcoming from Mason Jar Press in 2023. I am a reader for Uncanny Magazine and Bodega. I'm currently an intern for Entangle Publishing. I'm also a contributor for the media outlet The Geekery, where I write about webcomics, books, and more. This is my presentation on privilege and access in apocalyptic disaster films. This is a topic that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I've been a watcher, avid watcher of disaster films since I was younger. My mom would watch Twister, Dante's Peak, and all the other disaster movies, and I would actually watch with her. And the thing is, I was and I still am afraid of these films, and maybe that's why I'm so fixated on disaster films. And as the years went by and I watched more of these films, I realized a pattern. And like when you watch or consume a medium or a piece of media for so long, you begin to notice things like a pattern, a trend, or a cliche, or something very familiar. And for me, it became glaring that there's this issue of privilege and access in disaster movies back in the 70s, 90s, and also today. And I want to talk about that. And there's still not a lot on this subject. The I only found few articles about it, including Despina Kakodaki. She's the only other person I know that has written more than one article on this subject, and so I give her credit for it. So let's begin. Okay, first I want to do a land acknowledgement. I am a settler living on the Costan and Piscataway lands. The indigenous populations in the Washington, D.C. area are still living today and are the true stewards of their lands. As a Puerto Rican Taino, Afro-Taino, white-presenting Afro-descendant, born and partly raised in the land now called Puerto Rico, I acknowledge that the area I'm currently living in was established and developed by the exploitation, massacre, and displacement of its indigenous populations. So let's get into privilege because I'm going to be mentioning that word a lot. So, what do I mean by privilege when talking about fictional depictions of apocalyptic and disaster events? Well, privilege is defined as a special right or advantage based on race, social class, ability, religion, ethnicity, and having access to healthcare, education, jobs, food, and clean water. And and the opposite of privilege is social burdens. They're the people who are underprivileged, marginalized, and systemic racism, ethnic and cultural racism, gender, ableism, class discrimination, citizenship, and religious discrimination. Okay. So, why apocalyptic disaster films? Disaster films tend to be exaggerated and aren't 100% scientifically accurate. It's Hollywood. They make natural disasters worse than they are in real life. Disaster films rely on the spectacle for entertainment. Most of these movies are mediocre or just bad. However, there is some relevance to the cultural and political issues ongoing today. For instance, the film 2012, which just does misrepresent inappropriate Mayan beliefs and is an insult to Mayans living today, presents a neoliberal fantasy of global governments coming together for one cause. We see this in other films like World War C, Pacific Rim, and Independence Day, where everyone worked together despite of their differences. And right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that neoliberal fantasy hasn't come to fruition, which isn't surprising. There's no equality when it comes to giving people access to shelter and resources during times of crisis. Countries outside of the US still do not have enough vaccines, including the Philippines and the global south. Too many communities in the US still do not have access to clean water, food equality, better schools, and hospitals. Most people are still insisting that humans are going to totally destroy the earth. Not true. Humans are not the problem. It's the environmental choices. and how they manage their land that's causing climate change. And overpopulation isn't to blame for the lack of assets and resources. It's the government and general public being selected in who gets access to resources like organic food and clean water. We're experiencing the serious effects of climate change. Tornadoes in Alabama, the icy storm in Texas, hurricanes, earthquakes. We've seen privilege in the works, particularly among politicians and the rich. Remember Ted Cruz? He even left his dog behind while traveling to Cancun. Instead of helping the people struggling through the freezing temperatures in Texas, he used his status as a politician to go on vacation. And from my experience, my relatives in Puerto Rico suffered through the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in 2017. My late mother's family home was destroyed, and a beloved relative was missing and is now believed to be dead. And Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, but we're hardly treated as human beings. There was no electricity, no clean water. People in urban and rural areas died because medical facilities weren't able to reach them in time. So now we're going to get to the role of eugenics and how they apply to the portrayals in apocalyptic and disaster films. So in 1895, polymath Sir Francis Galton promoted the desirable traits of human heredity. Obviously, those desirable traits were and still are white, straight, cisgender, and not disabled in any way. Eugenics, eugenicists and their supporters want to limit the population of Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latino, queer, trans, and disabled people. And supporters of eugenics upheld the white supremacist idea of an American population, but then they started to back away during World War II, when Hitler killed a majority of the Jewish population. Apparently, it was humane to sterilize undesirable populations, but but killing was crossing the line. In fact, they call it negative eugenics. But American eugenicists are no better just because of Hitler and his genocide. Even someone who doesn't call themselves a Nazi can believe that being white, heteronormative, and able is the ideal. And this crosses over to the idea of the nuclear family. During World War II, women took over men's jobs. After the war, the divorce rates increased. Most people, especially the US government, aren't happy about that. Women should stay home and raise their kids. Men are supposed to work and be the breadwinner. Families have to stay together, and during the 1950s, there was a nuclear war scare. America and Russia were building nuclear weapons, and it became an arms race. So Americans were afraid that there was going to be a nuclear war, and the same would happen during the 80s. So there were these short films that's in the 50s that students and workers watched to know how to shelter themselves to survive during and after a nuclear attack. And at the end of this presentation, there are a couple of videos that you can watch afterward. I don't think we're going to have much time to watch them during the presentation. So if you're interested, you can just play them afterwards. Notice that in pretty much every disaster film, the main cast is usually a white, middle class, able family. I say usually because there are a few exceptions, like San Andreas, which stars Dwayne Johnson, who is Polynesian descent, and also the alien invasion movie Independence Day with Will Smith. Yes. And okay. And the recent film Greenland, in which the protagonist's son is type 1 diabetic, and that actually is a major point in the film if you have seen it already. Some disaster films have the main male character as divorced, who then reunites with his ex-wife during the disaster, and because of that, it reminds me of this idea of the nuclear family having to stay together during times of disaster. And another thing to note about apocalyptic disaster movies in general is the job positions of the protagonists or main cast: scientists, engineers, doctors, essential workers, the ones who will help recreate civilization. And the ones who don't necessarily hold those job positions either have the money or documentation to buy their way into shelter. We see this in the movies 2012 and Geostorm, where the rich and politicians are the ones aware of the coming disaster and are able to escape. And and also in most dystopian post-apocalyptic media, especially YA novels and films, you see that people are regulated to roles that contribute to a new society, service, science, education. One example I can think of right now is City of Ember. And also hierarchies are established based on race, social status, etc. It's this idea of that if you want to have shelter, you have to work to survive. And for some people that seems reasonable, but it's harmful because it's subjecting to the capitalistic idea you have that you have to provide something to society in order to prove yourself worthwhile. So who matters during disaster events? While apocalyptic disaster media are exaggerated and at times meant for entertainment, there is real life relevance to how people get prioritized for shelter and access to resources. Workers are considered essential who do not have health complications or disabilities. These are considered worthwhile to provide for a new society. And there's an example in the film. I'm going to mention 2012 again. I'm sorry, 2012. There's a part where they had all these arcs, and they were building them in secret, and only the higher class, the rich, and the politicians are able to access these type of shelter. And there was a part where there was the question of whether they should allow the Chinese workers, the arts are in China, to allow the Chinese workers to um to to enter the ship to give them shelter also. But it's the question of would they be quote useful. So, is it ethical, or are you going to do it to relieve guilt that you're going to leave people behind? And surprisingly, that is all. I actually try to keep this presentation simple because it's a broad topic. I mean, when you think about apocalyptic disaster movies, people you tend to think not just natural disasters, but alien invasions, zombies, pandemics, all sorts of apocalyptic scenarios. And I limit my examples to natural disaster movies. So I am opening the floor to questions. I will be visiting Discord right now. And I'm sorry this is really short. I didn't expect it. Yeah, I agree that 2012 is a mess. Yep. Um, when I was a teenager, I think it was like I'm pretty sure it was 10th or 11th grade. I took American history class, and the teacher made us watch The Day After, the nuclear war movie. I honestly like the way when that movie scared me. Yeah. Oh, and thank you, JP. Okay, I am heading over to Discord on my desktop now. Hmm. Hmm. Allow Oops, sorry. Oops, sorry. No, I don't want to see that. Oh, no. 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 That. No, if people can see this video, from the movie The Day After Tomorrow. Oh, um, Allison, yes. Actually, I'm working on this now, one of my writing projects, but I would like to see disaster apocalyptic fiction from the perspective and point of views of the people left behind. Like so much we're seeing these middle class, higher class politicians. I mean, but what about the lower class people, the working class? What about the disabled people? And yes, I do have a presentation link. Should be. It should work. And did I answer your question, Allison? We'll see. Okay, so hopefully you can see this scene because I really want to open the discussion. Okay, I'm going to type video just in case you cannot see in the presentation. But yeah, I really wanted to talk about this because I didn't really think about it until I rewatched the movie. It's just like an unironic scenario. I mean, it's, even with the immigration issues going on right now, like, and also with the January 6th Capitol riots. Any more questions? Questions? Yeah, again, sorry, this is short. I didn't realize that this presentation is going to be too concise. I was focusing too much on trying to keep things as simple. Yeah, yeah, I agree, Coral. I agree. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I find it really, yeah. Oh, I think this is recorded, so. Mm-mm. Yeah, I really, I mean, I know that day after tomorrow, like pretty much all disaster movies is just disaster porn, rush exaggerated. I mean, I know that day after tomorrow, the climate change project, the process was sped up. Yeah, I see. Yeah, Coral. Oh yeah, okay, Adria, I see your question. Let's see, try to think. Actually, there is um, you can actually read this in Kakodaki's article representing politics in disaster films, but there's this theme of self-preservation and self-sacrifice in a lot of these disaster films. Like, the either there's a character who who stays behind to stay behind for the people, like the president in 2012, and then there's the individual who wants to survive, which is human instinct. No, we all want to survive in times of disaster. Oh, okay. Cora said something really, really important in the discourse. She said also something I don't like about that movie. She's talking about The Day After Tomorrow at all. Is that it really ignored the increased impact climate change will have has had on economically disadvantaged people. Yes, this so much. Actually, I'm actually exploring that in my work right now. That there's there are a few disaster media that explore disability. There's that pandemic film Parks Pavilion where there's an old couple, one of them using a wheelchair. Uh, well, yeah, and there's also On the Edge of Gone by Corin Dubis. That's a YA novel. Let me type it down on Discord. Hope I spell her name right. Uh, Any more questions or areas you want me to explore more? If there's no questions, I can end the mini right now. If that's all right. Right? Okay, there's some people typing on the Discord, so thank you all for attending. I mean, honestly, this is nerve wracking. I mean, I'm doing this by myself, so thank you for your patience. And this will be on release on YouTube. So thank you, everyone, and bye bye.